Ratchet and Clank sits among the PS4 titles that I believe don't get talked about enough. Everyone goes on about Bloodborne, and God of War, and Uncharted, and Horizon Zero Dawn, and Ghost of Tsushima, and Spider-Man, and so on. That's all for good reason, of course. Those games are incredible and deserve all the praise and accolades, but there are a handful of titles that I feel like got swept under the rug upon release. My last two videos covering Shadow of the Colossus and Days Gone, real quick, thank you so much if you've watched those. The feedback I've gotten on them, particularly the Days Gone review, has been incredible, and I'm so grateful for every like, comment, and subscriber I've gained. It really does mean the world to me. Anyway, moving on. Just like Shadow of the Colossus, Days Gone, hell, even Concrete Genie was underrated, Ratchet and Clank seems like it has been forgotten to history. Which is a real shame, because it seems like the games industry isn't interested in making this type of game anymore. A third-person action platformer with a Pixar-like visual style. There are, of course, the recent remakes of Spyro and Crash Bandicoot, but they are far more focused on platforming rather than shooting. I'm talking about games like Sunset Overdrive, which funnily enough Insomniac also developed, or Jak and Daxter, which Naughty Dog has seemed to have moved on from. Don't get me wrong, I like franchises ending. I don't want every IP to go on forever. Things need to end eventually, and devs need to go into bigger and better things. But I can't help but feel a little sad when a genre of games I grew up with seems to be all but non-existent. So with all that said, we're going to be taking a look at Ratchet and Clank on the PS5, with the 60 FPS patch that was released at the beginning of April. And I'm going to tell you why you should play this if you haven't. Let's get straight into it, because I want this to be another quick video. For anyone who doesn't know what Ratchet and Clank is, let me quickly get you up to scratch. Originally released back in 2002 on the PS2, Ratchet and Clank was a smash hit both critically and commercially. It then went on to get 3 sequels on the PS2, which are among my favourite games of all time, due to both nostalgia and them just being amazing. I'd also love to hear what your favourite Ratchet and Clank game is, down in the comments below. Once the PS3 came around, the series had a soft reboot with the Future series of games. They were still sequels to the original 4, but they ultimately started to turn the franchise into something else. I never played the Future series of games until a couple of years ago, and I thought they were just fine, but didn't come close to the PS2 games, particularly because of the story and characters. I just didn't really like the new direction they had taken. So back in 2016, Insomniac released Ratchet and Clank, a remake of the original with the same name. Which, can I say real quick, is a really stupid and annoying naming convention that this industry loves. So this is a remake, and it covers most of the original game, but sadly it has cut out some of the planets. But it has also added in new weapons, new enemies and bosses, a new story, new customization, and all the quality of life updates that 14 years brings you. And finally, a new coat of paint, and it's a brilliant coat of paint. However, before we talk about all the amazing things this game does, I want to briefly talk about the new story, because yeah, it's not very good, and that's because of a few reasons. Chief among them is that this is not only a remake, but also based off of an animated film by the same name that was released alongside the game. Now, that was a bit of a mouthful, and if you think it sounds like an idea that was created by a bunch of suits sitting around a table one day, thinking it'd be quirky to release a remake of a game based on a movie that's based on a game, then I'd be inclined to think you're right. Besides that idea being horrible, the film also followed the same fate, as it was roasted by critics and audiences did not see it. So you can imagine how well this game's story holds up when about half the cutscenes are just ripped straight from the movie. It doesn't work well at all. It feels rushed. It feels disjointed. It's not funny at all. Which is extremely subjective, I know, but it's children's humour. And there are way too many modern day jokes.
Post your thoughts on the social medias. The kids love their social medias. Hashtag Gadgetron.
Coupled with the bad plot and story is that it even feels like the voice actors and animators didn't even want to create the in-game cutscenes. Everyone just stands around, awkwardly spewing exposition and bad jokes at each other. All the characters seem lifeless, with little to no body movement and minimal facial expressions. For all those reasons, I think this story is bad. It's not offensive or anything like that, but the original story and characters are much more interesting and better written. My advice would be to force yourself through the story once, and then skip all cutscenes on subsequent New Game Pluses, or just skip them from the very beginning and focus on the gameplay, because that's what is incredible. Gameplay in Ratchet and Clank can be broken down into 3 easy parts. Firstly is the third person shooting, which is the best. Then there's platforming, which I wish there was more of, and lastly are the mini games, which are used to break up the pacing. If you're wondering where the Clank sections come in, I've put them under mini games because that's what they ultimately feel like here. They're few and far between and are quite basic. You have to solve puzzles that require mini robots, and they can have their form changed based on the puzzle. For example, if you need to cross from one platform to another, you can turn one into a bridge. Or maybe you need to get something from above you, so you can turn one into a bounce pad. Then there's locked doors, which can be opened by putting an electrical robot on the nearby coils. The later puzzles will mix and match these three elements to create some interesting scenarios, but overall they're pretty easy. Next with the minigames are all the different forms of aerial combat with Ratchet's ship, turret sections, and hoverboard racing. On the whole, these are pretty ordinary, and if you've played any other Ratchet game, you'll know what to expect, and there's nothing innovative about these sections. Admittedly, the hoverboard sections are fun and look great, but once you get into New Game Plus, they become a bit of a chore and slow the pace of the game down, feeling almost like unskippable cutscenes, which is a bit of a shame because they're about a third of the content. You're probably thinking to yourself, wait, I thought you said this game was incredible and underrated. Well, we're finally at the great part. The reason you play Ratchet and Clank is for its arsenal of weapons, and this game has the best in the entire franchise. Like any great action game, it's crucial to make each individual weapon feel different from the last, and Ratchet and Clank succeeds tenfold in this area. You'll start off with the fusion grenade, which when thrown at your enemies deals damage in an area. Shortly after acquiring that, you'll gain access to the combustor, which works like a regular pistol and is the best for single targets. The weaponry can feel slow at the beginning, but each subsequent planet you go to will allow you to purchase a new weapon, and some of the later ones get really wild. Like the Predator launcher that readies missiles and will lock onto enemies that are in front of you, or the Buzz Blades that shoot out saw blades and bounce off nearby walls, allowing for a single shot to hit multiple targets. Or my favourite weapon, the Pixelizer. This is basically a shotgun, but it turns anything it hits into 3D sprites. It's a very basic weapon, but has such a great twist on what would be a traditional shotgun. And that's only 5 weapons of 15, each different from the last and as satisfying to use. Additionally, each of your weapons can be leveled up 5 times, and at level 5 they'll gain a new ability. The Pixelizer will be able to charge up energy for a harder hitting shot. The fusion grenade will release mini bombs from the explosion of the main grenade. In addition, once you're in New Game Plus, Omega versions can be bought, allowing you to level them up 5 additional times. Speaking of New Game Plus, that is a good chunk of the content you can expect out of Ratchet & Clank, as you're going to want to upgrade all your weapons, try them all out, and unlock the Rhino, which is essentially the BFG of Ratchet & Clank games. This time around, it's locked behind holo cards, which are collectibles you can find throughout the planets, and each defeated enemy has a chance to drop one. These add some nice side progression to your weapons, as each card is part of a pack of 3. When you complete a whole pack, you'll get a passive reward like extra bolts obtained, extra raritanium, and so on. Raritanium is used to further upgrade your weapons' skill trees, and they get more expansive as you increase their levels. Okay, so there's a lot of customization here, and that's the name of the game. Use an ever-expanding arsenal of weapons, and level them up so they effectively feel completely different from level 1 to level 10. I have a lot more to say about this game and the franchise as a whole, but Rift Apart is coming out in June, and I plan on reviewing it, so I don't want to sound like I'm just repeating myself in that video. Some final thoughts I have on Ratchet & Clank are: the visuals, as you've probably noticed already, look incredible. It feels like you're playing an animated movie, and at 60 FPS, the action is smooth, and the controls are tight and responsive. Progression doesn't just stop at the weapons. Since this is my 5th or 6th playthrough, I knew what to expect, but I forgot how much equipment you really get. Early on, Clank will get a helicopter upgrade, allowing you to glide and jump higher, but that'll be upgraded to a jetpack later on. You'll also gain the ability to breathe underwater indefinitely, so you don't need to worry about Ratchet's oxygen. Both grind boots and magna boots will be unlocked, allowing you to grind rails and traverse magnetic walkways. And the list goes on as always. I was utterly shocked by the amount of stuff unlocked in this. I suppose once you've played New Game Plus a bunch of times, you forget what it's like to start with nothing. All in all, that's Ratchet & Clank. It's an incredibly fun game that's so easy to pick up and have a great time for the 8 hours or so it takes to beat it. While the story is pretty bad, and some of the minigames outstay their welcome, especially on New Game Plus, the core combat loop, weaponry, progression, and visuals are exceptional. This is a real treat to play, especially in 60 FPS if you have a PS5, and I cannot wait to see what Insomniac has in store with Rift Apart on June 11th.